This is a special podcast presentation from 700WLW.com. This is Thompson on Demand.
I'm still digging on the information that I floated out there last week. Rich Hoffman joined me last week and told me that the group that is doing the search for the superintendent at Lakota High School, they suggested that if you want the superintendent of Lakota, the next superintendent, to compete with CEOs, that they'd have to pay him $300,000 a year. Then they start backing off of it. I'm still digging. I'm see if I can get how I get on, even the head of that search. So far, not a lot of luck, but I'll keep digging. They did float out there the idea that, well, it would probably be more like $150,000 to $200,000. $200,000 for a superintendent? That still seems pretty inflated to me. Well, we have gone after the teachers. We've gone after other government workers saying, listen, you've got to feel the pain just like all of the private sector has as well. But it does seem to me that the superintendents, the administrators, that they're not feeling the same pain. And a lot of times these superintendents, these administrators make a whole lot of money. In fact, there's going to be an I-Team investigation tonight on Channel 9. Brendan Keefe joins me now. How are you, Brendan?
Hey, good morning, Doc.
This is fascinating stuff. Tell me about your story tonight.
You know, we looked at it basically just what you're saying, Doc. Hey, let's take a look at superintendent pay in light of teacher layoffs and severe cuts to education. You know, we're not getting involved in the politics of whether you think cuts to education and teachers is a good idea.
You're just presenting the facts on it.
But if you're going to cut teachers, if Princeton City Schools are going to cut 65 teachers, let's take a look at what the superintendent's making. And last year, he got a $10,000 bonus after laying off teachers. He gets a $550 a month car allowance on his personal car. This isn't a fleet vehicle. This isn't a take-home car. It's his personal vehicle. And he gets $550 a month to pay for it while they're cutting preschool and gifted programs. Is that a good idea is the question we're asking.
How much did he make last year on his base salary?
That's Dr. Gary Pack. He made $140,000 base salary. He's not in the top five. Believe it or not, the top five, you'd be amazed, make more than the governor of Ohio. That's Mary Ronan in Cincinnati, $189,000.
Wow.
Kevin Brighton Mason, $167,000 plus. He's a double dipper, and when I say a double dipper, he's actually drawing a pension from the same job. This means he retired on a Tuesday and started back on a Thursday in the same job. We estimate he's collecting somewhere around $150,000. That information under state law is private, but our estimate, $150,000 retirement for Kevin Brighton Mason plus the $167 base salary. That's before the $20,000 annuity. They pay his Medicare taxes, his life insurance policy, 100% dental and vision. It's pretty amazing stuff. So
with salary and if your estimates are right with the retirement, that's notably over $300,000 a year. Plus, then you said the $20,000 bonus back for retirement and all of this other stuff is huge.
Well, you know, you had Rich Hoffman on last week, and we interviewed Rich for the story. He's going to be in our story tonight at 6 o'clock. And, you know, he was looking at these numbers, too. And he said, basically, the people don't understand the nuances of these contracts. We got the contracts for these top five and went over them with a fine-tooth comb. And then we asked experts to explain what these things mean. There's these things like STRS pickup. That doesn't mean anything to you and me.
STRS is what? Is STARS? That's the state teachers' retirement system?
Correct. Now, teachers pay 10% of their own salary in, and the districts pay 14%. But the superintendents don't pay anything because the school boards pick it up. Now, what they pick up is not only the employer contribution, but the employee contribution. And then they pay something called the pickup on the pickup. What that is they actually get retirement benefits on the retirement benefits. So what they do is STRS considers those payments by the district, an additional 24% of their salary, as base salary for future compensation for retirement.
Okay, see, that's the frustrating part. If we throw out a number and you say, okay, a superintendent makes $140,000 a year, people say, well, that's you're not getting rich off of that. You're paying them well because they're the CEO of the district essentially, and they're responsible for all this money and students or whatever. But like you said, they're not necessarily getting all the information without digging for it, that you've got retirement and all of the, cars and everything else that goes into it, maybe double dipping, which puts it up to a few $100,000 a year.
Yeah, and here's the other thing. These superintendents, and it must be said, and frankly, we didn't even have time in our 8-minute story tonight. We've actually blown out the first commercial break tonight on 9 News at 6 because we believe that much in the story. People say it's all about ratings. A couple of superintendents told me that. This is all about ratings. You know what? It's not, because if it was about revenue, we wouldn't be blowing out commercial breaks, which, basically pay our rent. We're doing this because we think the story is that important. I mean, this is a, sort of news magazine length story and investigation, and we're only getting into the surface. But it must be said that these superintendents are generally highly effective. Many of them have either increased or maintained high ratings for their districts. So we're not going to get into the debate of whether they're worth their base salary or not. The question is, does a government employee who is, essentially living off the tax dollars get their car payment paid for? Channel 9 pays me a pretty good salary, but if I went into my boss's office and said, hey, news director, because I use my car for work, my personal car, I want you to pay my car payment every month, they'd laugh me out of the office.
They'd be, Doc Thompson with the I-team tonight. Brendan is gone.
Exactly. And here's the other thing. When you look at these figures, don't look at the base salary, because it's a very small part of the story. Do you realize these guys, the top 4 of the top 5, we're talking about Mason, Sycamore, Cincinnati, they don't pay any of their Medicare taxes. These superintendents get their Medicare taxes on their paycheck paid by the district. They don't pay Social Security because they have a pension, but they also don't pay into that pension. So next time you get your pay stub, look at how much of your check goes to FICA, Medicare, Social Security, and all of that goes into the pockets of these superintendents because they're immune from these taxes because the districts pick them up.
I bet most people would just say, hey, listen, if I could get out from underneath some of the taxes I pay, that would be a substantial increase in my salary. I'd be in pretty good shape right now. Well, they're doing that plus the $150,000 or whatever $1,000 a year salary.
And that's really it, Doc, when we started looking at this. And then, look, here's some things that aren't going to be in the news story tonight because there's so much detail. We have so much information that we just found stunning. STRS actually puts out a manual. This is that teacher's retirement system. They put out a how-to manual, how to double dip. Now, granted, it's in response to questions from their members saying, what's legal, what's not. But when you look at this thing, we found it on their website. It's a PDF file anyone can download, and it says, here's what you can do. You do only have to take 1 day off, and you can get rehired in the same job, and then you just have to wait 2 months to collect your benefits. But you're considered retired. And here's what could Clyde Gray retire from Channel 9 and collect a Scripps pension at the same time he was anchoring the 6 and 11 o'clock news? It just doesn't happen in the private sector. And everyone's answer is, well, it's legal. There is pending legislation right now in Columbus to undo everything we're talking about.
As far as the double dipping, you mean?
Double dipping. There's House Bill 202. There's another similar Senate bill. It would say that it would severely limit your ability to double dip. And the reason is, look, back in 2000,
they changed the law.
They changed the law, right? You used to have to wait 18 months to get rehired and keep your benefits. The reason is, hey, look, if you had a really good superintendent on this side of the river, meaning Cincinnati, they could go across the river into Boone, Kenton, or Campbell County, and then we lose that talent, so to speak. And so this was sort of the thinking. But, this is also saying that these guys are sort of top CEOs when, by and large, these superintendents come up as teachers within their own districts. So if the idea is to lure the best candidate, well, if they're already in your district and they're already a teacher there or an administrator or a principal, how is it that we're luring the best candidate, in a nationwide search? And all of these contracts, Doc, are identical. I mean, they're not exactly the same, but this STRS pickup that we've seen that amounts to a 10% raise basically for all these superintendents, we found it in every single contract we've looked at. How is that possible? Well, guess what? They have the Buckeye Administrators Association, and there's a conference that they have, and at that conference, there's a class in how to negotiate contracts.
When do they have their conference? I mean, I'm sure it varies, but is it usually one time a year, or a couple times a year?
It's interesting because we looked at it. They have different events at different times of the year, but one of them is called, the actual class is called Aspiring to the Ascendancy. It's like the Superintendency. Aspiring to the Superintendency, and it's a seminar. And in that seminar, one of the things discussed is contract negotiations. So obviously someone gets up at one of these things and says, here's what you can ask for, here's what you can demand, here's what's standard.
This is incredible. I didn't realize it was as bad. I mean, I knew it was bad. I didn't realize this bad. You know, we talked about SB 5 forever. And, of course, people like me that say, you know, we need this because there's a lot of things going wrong, and people hear it and think we're attacking government workers. No, it's just there are some things not right. And as much as I said we needed to look at SB 5, this is something we need to look at. And I said it at the time that the superintendents who don't fall under the SB 5 with collective bargaining usually are some of the worst offenders of this stuff if you think that they are being paid too much.
Well, they have the best union in the world. It's called management. You don't need a union when you're running the show. And here's the other thing. Most of these superintendents that we looked at, and I don't have an exact figure, as you know, 78% of all statistics are made up on the spot? But I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I can tell you that a majority, at least a plurality, of superintendents are there at their districts longer than their school boards. So the school boards are supposed to be the supervisor of these superintendents, but it's sort of like a prosecutor and grand jury relationship. The superintendent's really running the show, and this is having sat for 21 years through school board meetings. This is the same way across the country, where the superintendent it's right on the agenda. It's called Superintendent's Recommendations, and 99% of the time, those are rubber stamped by the school board. The school board neither has the time nor the inclination to investigate the underlying things the superintendent's recommending. So, every one of these school boards is very proud and in love with their superintendent, and pretty much whatever the superintendent asks for, they get. And what's really interesting, Doc, is when you see some of the explanations or justifications we've received from these superintendents. By the way, every single one we asked to do an on-camera interview turned us down. Same thing with the board presidents. These are elected officials who said we'd rather not talk about the issue.
I wonder why that is.
Right.
It doesn't benefit them, Brandon.
Well, but we really do want the other side of the story.
Mm-hmm.
I can show you a stack of emails where we're saying, please, if you're not going to talk, give us somebody who can represent your side of the story and justify these salaries. And they've just said we don't want to play that game. The superintendents, like Dr. Gary Pack in Princeton, his email was, well, this car allowance, he said, at 50 cents a mile, I drove 8,000 miles for the district last year, and when you throw in maintenance on my vehicle, gasoline, tires, and everything else, I probably lost money on the deal. Well, 8,000 miles times 50 cents is pretty simple math, half a dollar. That comes out to $4,000. They pay him $6,600 for his car payment. So they could have saved $2,600 if they just gave him the 50 cents a mile. Now, the 50 cents a mile, according to the IRS, is supposed to cover all of that.
Right.
The gas and the mileage and all of that, maintenance on your vehicle. So it's really interesting. I don't know how you can take a payment on your personal car. And this isn't my opinion. This is a question. As a reporter,
well, no,
how can you take a personal payment on your car and then lay off 65 teachers, and you're actually the one who picks who loses their job? How can you do that?
Well, and I can't. I know you can't comment on this, but I'll say my speculation is the reason nobody wanted to comment is there was no justification that would have sounded good on camera. There's nothing they could say that would sound good on camera.
Well,
I mean,
and you're right. One of the answers we got from Steve Moore, he's the school board president in Princeton, and the reason we're looking at Princeton, by the way, is because they've had the largest percentage cuts in staff. They cut 105 positions, and 65 of those are teachers. They've cut preschool in half, they've cut gifted in half, and they've also cut busing. Now think about it. More students are going to have to walk to school next year in the Princeton City School District, but the superintendent is driven to work by the taxpayers. That to me is the sort of contrast that's very telling. Now, Steve Moore, the board president, told me, well, if this guy was the CEO of a company with this number of employees and this amount of budget, he'd be making $400,000 a year. And they suggested, he and the superintendent suggested, a better story would be comparing these guys to CEOs. But the difference is, these aren't CEOs of a for-profit corporation. They are administrators of a taxpayer-funded public school system.
That's a great point. All right, it's Brendan Keefe, the I-Team, tonight at 6 o'clock on Channel 9.
And Doc, here's the thing. Right after 6 o'clock on WCPO.com, this isn't a plug. This is something you're going to want to check out.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to have the salaries of every single superintendent in Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana, not just the tri-state area, all three states. Every public school superintendent, you can search by their name or you can search by your district, and you can see what they made this year, last year, the year before.
Now, I'm going to link to that as well because I tried to find all that information last week, and it's really difficult to find. So you guys putting that together is great.
We did the work for you, and we're also putting about 7 full contracts online, unredacted, so you can examine them for yourself. They're the people's records, and we just went through the trouble of getting them for you.
The I-Team tonight at Channel 9 at 6 o'clock.
Yep. Thanks, Doc.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Boy, that is fascinating. If you are somebody, the argument's been, well, Doc, these superintendents are like CEOs, right? And you want the best, right? Well, the governor is the CEO of the entire state, including all of those school districts. The governor of Ohio makes just over $144,000 a year. The lieutenant governor, $142,000. Secretary of State, attorney general, and treasurer, all $109,000 a year. The chief justice makes $150,000. The associate justices make $141,000 in the entire state of Ohio. But meanwhile, these top 5 CEOs, these top 5 superintendents that Brandon mentioned, $189,000, $167,000, $163,000, $160,000, and that's not including the taxes they pay on their behalf, giving them the car, and all of the other perks. Doc Thompson on 700 WL. Fox 19 Storm Tracker forecast for meteorologist Frank Marzullo. Warm today, sunshine, high around 78. You got rain developing tonight, overnight low 57, and more rain and thunderstorms possible tomorrow. Still a high around 82. Currently at 63 at 700 WLW. Well, it is just incredible when you see the amount these guys are making. Brendan brought up a great point about all the additional things. So I don't fault people for making that money. I'm not jealous. I'm not coveting what they have. I don't want to go get it for myself. It's not about that. It's about what you think is appropriate for a superintendent. What should they be making? What is reasonable? What is reasonable based on what you and most people make in the state of Ohio or within the school system that they are superintendent of? And then is it reasonable for them to make that amount of money? Isn't it reasonable for them to make that amount of money based on how much you pay for the schools? Based on what the teachers get paid or what they don't get paid? Based on cutting those teachers? $190,000 a year? Well, $89,000 for Mary Ronan. And that includes a $1 million term life insurance policy, $500 a month, car allowance, $600 a month for professional stipend for expenses, $3 million liability insurance, 27 days vacation, $5,000 annual retention bonus, $25,000 lump sum for moving. They now pay 20% of her medical coverage, up from 15%. That's just her. And it goes on and on like that. How much is enough? How much is too much? Sid Lebanon, you're on 700 WLW.
Morning, Doc.
Hi there.
hate to add insult to injury, but let me throw Mark North at you again from Lebanon.
Yeah.
The levy went down, and, of course, he was looking for a job last month in Cuyahoga County, and that fell through. And now last week he's looking to leave and go to Twinsburg. So now the taxpayers are paying for that. They're paying for him. They're still making his paycheck. He's got a $650 a month car allowance, so I'm sure he's using that.
I just, Sid, I'm amazed.
We pay for his cell phone. I'm sure those calls are being done on our dime.
Oh, yeah, but it was frustrating thing for me when you got car insurance or car allowance and stuff like that, and the insurance, $650 a month. Listen, most people are not leasing or paying off a car for $600 a month. Most of us are find it difficult for $400 a month. We
are paying this guy to go look for other work because it got too hot.
Wow.
And we will continue to do so. Well,
I hope you watch tonight, and like I said, I'll put a link to the list of what everybody makes and all of their contracts in that Channel 9 did on my blog at 700WLW.com. You probably check for it late tonight or early tomorrow morning.